Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 21. This is part 2 of our interview with world-renowned dog trainer Michael Ellis. Stick around as we discuss our thoughts on where we think the future of dog training is going, and also get the inside scoop of some of the innovations that are going on over at the Michael Ellis School of Dog Training.
What I wanted to ask you, Michael, I wanted to sort of bridge two ideas that we've talked about in this episode here. So not only, of course, all of your work online with LEERBURG, and when we talked with Tyler and his Consider the Dog stuff, but Brent and I have been working on something which I don't want to talk too much about because it's very much an unfinished thought at this point. But we notice a lot of times with people making more and more content these days, not to like watch back themselves necessarily, but to put online and, and just put information out there. Is there ever a downside of creating too much content? And the reason why I ask that is because what me and Brent have talked about is we notice all of the great dog training websites like LEERBURG and Consider the Dog and MichaelEllisSchool.com and stuff like that. There's endless content, but it's curated. You guys put up, you decide who goes up and everything else, as opposed to like YouTube has any old person who has a camera and an opinion. And we want to try to figure out, like, in your opinion, is there a such thing as too much? Do people just get analysis paralysis and either don't stick to one program long enough or just don't do anything?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, 100%, right? So there's no doubt it's most dangerous for people that are beginners, for sure, right? Because they don't have the filter yet to recognize what's right and not. And so somebody says something and they're like, well, that makes sense. I don't have any information to the contrary. Right. And they can go down the wrong path. Also be overwhelming to people, like, how do I know which one to choose? And so they choose none,
right?
And like, or they don't get deep enough. And then the idea of hopping around is a major problem. Yes. We used to call it seminaritis, right, for sport dog trainers, where somebody's on a program and they go to a seminar, they hear a new idea, which may be a great idea, and then they go back and disrupt what they're doing, and then 2 weeks later they hear another idea and they change everything again, and then they hear another idea and they change everything again. You can't overemphasize the role of consistency in dog training. Good. You can have a less evolved program and be consistent and do better than somebody that's thoughtful and is choosing to use more evolved programs but not sticking to one idea, right? And there's certain types of training that don't conflict with each other. They're just slightly different in And there are others where you're going to cause your dog lots of stress and confusion. The dog's like, hey, I figured this out, and you're coming at this completely differently. So I think there are lots of pitfalls there, and I kind of don't envy a beginning person. I'm busy a lot, so I don't get out on the internet and watch a lot of other content. I have lots of trainer friends that draw my attention to specific things that are good and worth paying attention to, which I'm internally grateful for, because I'm not filtering through all that stuff by any stretch of imagination now. And so somebody will draw my attention to something and I'll go check it out. But for a beginner, where do you start? And that's potentially a problem.
Yeah. Can I, just before we move on, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to someone who, if you don't know him, which you might, I definitely need to get you guys linked up, because his name is Sean Thompson and he runs Top Dog. It's a board and train facility here in Gilbert, Arizona. And he's a really, really fantastic, like bite sport competitor, but he's also an amazing just trainer in general. I had the real honor of just working with him for a few months when I had first moved here. And one thing, I mean, not only did he love you guys with LEERBURG, he was actually one of the kennels I was talking about that. It was
mandatory.
Like, yeah. Well, it wasn't so much mandatory. Well, he's also like has this crazy, like really nice, just energy, kind of laid back guy to him. And so I wouldn't say it was like mandatory, you must XYZ, but it was like, hey, listen, if you have an hour of your time, I'll leave you on the clock and pay you. Sit down and watch this LEERBURG video. And he would pay his trainers to go to seminars and still get paid for that day. He's amazing. So the reason why I bring him up is because maybe you've talked about it before, but he was talking about exactly that. Don't jump from program to program to program. Make sure that you stick to one, and make sure you do your due diligence to find a good one, and especially a good one for your dog. And there's those different levels of filters you have to kind of sift through, but pick one, stick to it, get good at it, then we'll see what's happening after the fact. So Sean Thompson, I really want to give him his shout out, and I'm going to link you guys up.
Yeah, and the name sounds familiar, so there's a possibility we've run into each other at some point. I don't remember it.
He's like, it's me, Sean. It's me.
Yeah.
I don't apologize, Sean. But no, it's absolutely true. And like, I encourage trainers to go to seminars, expose yourself to all that stuff, but don't change your training until you filtered it.
Right.
I used to tell all the people that I trained with, go to that seminar, but don't take your dog.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You take your dog, you're going to decide, you know what, I'm going to jump up and I'm going to do it. Right. Process it.
Right.
Watch it.
Right.
Pay close attention, bring it back, filter it, think about it, and see where it fits into what you're doing now before you just make a wholesale change because it seems like a good idea or it seems logical. And a lot of the information is good information if you're on a certain path. It's the right thing, right? But if you toss everything out every time, it causes you all kinds of
a lot of things that I tell a lot of my clients, because it's like my generation's on YouTube all the time, and I'm always getting that you know, the client was like, I watch this video, that video, and I always tell them, I say, you know, the things on YouTube are not wrong, they're just incomplete, and there tends to be just this idea of like, you're getting snippets, but the things that they're not taking into consideration are the other dimensions of dog training. They're not taking into consideration your dog's genetics. They're not taking into consideration, you know, your environment. They're not taking into consideration all these things. And so that's something I kind of want to dive into. And I do kind of want to share a little bit, get your opinion on this, Michael. And then we'll go back to the different dimensions of dog training that we have to look at as dog trainers. But so one of my passion projects I've been working on with one of my other my clients, who is an actual she's a child researcher, and what she did is she helped come up with a child research quizzes, profiles to help kids understand their best learning abilities and techniques. Right. And so she's created a website. It's called thrively.com. And pretty much kids from, you know, kids that are on the spectrum, or kids that have special needs, or even just kids in general, ADD, ADHD, who, you know, may have certain different learning, just learning difficulties. Right. But it's able to take questions, ideas, or questions, scenarios, and it creates a learning profile for these kids to help them kind of find a curriculum that might fit them. And so for the last 2 years, I've been working on this with them. However, there's always this fear that I have is like, would this be a useful tool, or could this be a detrimental tool if it's not intelligent enough? Right. And this is always my question. So what would be your advice?
So if I think about it, like I think about it from a dog perspective, like you mentioned genetics in passing. And so let's say if we're talking about people that are on the spectrum, obviously that's a genetic thing. It is. And I think the value of those profiles and things like that, gathering that kind of information, is it gives you a direction to go and helps you kind of understand what problems you might be encountering. What you want to avoid with any of that stuff is making it a self-fulfilling prophecy, like that this is what this person, or for our case, this dog is, just because of their genetics, or just because of that evaluation, their profile, that they can't move on that defines them. And then it can affect how a trainer looks at them. They've already made a decision, right? And genetics is a huge part.
Development
of it.
is a huge part.
They're hand in hand. They're inseparable. You don't know how much is which and how much is that, but it's there. Like there's for certain, it's a giant deal. But we have to be careful not to let it pigeonhole dogs and their potential and just because we decided. Like a classic example that I use all the time is that many German Shepherds are super possessive of their stuff. Like they like their stuff, right? So working German Shepherds love to have their stuff and they like to keep it. But the working German Shepherd says, oh, he's possessive, he won't bring his toys back. I'm like, oh, shocking, right? No, how surprising is that? And so somebody gets a German Shepherd puppy and they're already decided that that's the case. So instead of looking at the animal in front of them and making adjustments, they've already made it like, oh, well, that's what it's going to be, right? Kind of thing. And I think when you do profiles like that, then you recognize that's a snapshot in time, and it can give you information that you can use. Just don't get too tied to the fact that that's what that creature is.
And
totality.
that was always my thinking, is to kind of just help create a direction, not to predestine this dog to be a certain way, you know?
Exactly. As long as you do it that way and you keep reminding
Yeah.
yourself, like,
Yeah.
then yeah, I think it's useful. I think
Like
it's
a
highly,
very, you know, like everyone's done like a personality test or some, you know, the ENFJ, Myers-Briggs, stuff
Myers-Briggs,
like that. But there are some personality tests out there that actually just say you could be doing this, and this. And they're just kind of, they just explain how you could be feeling or processing something based on your genetics, based on your upbringing, based on this, based on that. And it gives you insight to know, oh, I'm not crazy. This is a thing,
Yeah.
right? And so with people with dogs, that I want it to provide that type of help where it's like, oh, my dog's not psycho. He's just a 6-month-old, blah, blah, blah. But it's something that someone's able to do on their own, right? So that if they are going to go on YouTube, or they are going to look for a trainer, or they are going to go and seek out professionals, that at least they have an intelligent start, right?
Incredibly useful, I think, for the layperson. Honestly, I think that would be
Well,
like to give them a direction to go and a way of thinking about things, and then maybe not blaming the dog for certain types of things as well. You know, for me, that's you see lots of people selecting dogs because they have an idea about
the breed.
Oh, I always wanted a shepherd. I always wanted a whatever it was
Mhm.
going to be, right? And then they get a dog with a certain genetic package, and then they're upset that
Right.
it's like this, right? And so anything like that gave them an idea, say like, hey, that's natural behavior for this dog. No, it's not natural behavior for the King Cavalier.
You're right.
It definitely is natural behavior for this. This is wired in, and so that all that would be, I think, incredibly potentially
Very nice.
useful.
Well,
complicated.
Very complicated. Yeah, it's a big complicated. I mean, I'm 2 years into it. I mean, all we have are maps. You know, maps so far.